All right, thanks again to those who have already joined us. We'll be starting the webinar in just a minute. Okay, we're right at noon, so let's go ahead and get started. We have a great program for today. I want to welcome all of you to the 11th installment of the Vision Zero Central Florida Safety Speaker Series, Mass in Motion, How Kinetic Energy Impacts Transportation Safety. My name is Laura Bauk. I'm the Manager of Project Development here at Metroplan Orlando, and I will be your host for today's webinar. During our program today, we will delve into how kinetic energy can impact safety planning and design efforts. Transportation safety outcomes may sometimes feel like a matter of chance. The driver looks away for a moment, a pedestrian steps off the curb too early, or a cyclist isn't seen soon enough. But crash outcomes are not random. They follow the laws of physics, and one principle in particular shapes nearly every injury we see on our roads: kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is what a moving vehicle carries with it, and it grows faster than most people realize. When speed doubles, the energy involved in a crash doesn't just double, it quadruples. That energy has to go somewhere when a collision occurs, and too often it's absorbed by the human body, which is simply not built to withstand forces at that scale. Understanding how kinetic energy behaves is the foundation of understanding why some crashes are survivable and others are not. Today, our goal is going to connect that scientific reality to the decisions we all make in transportation planning, design, and policy. Because once we understand how energy behaves, we can shape our environments in order to manage it, slowing it down, redirecting it, or absorbing it before it reaches people, to help us achieve our goal of zero traffic fatalities and severe injuries. And because our streets serve all different functions within our communities, understanding the kinetic energy risk in relation to adjacent land uses, to the volume of users on a corridor, that can be used to help us inform various elements of our roadway design. Next slide, please, Rachel. So our panel today is going to walk us through the science behind kinetic energy, what it is, how it scales, and why small changes in speed can mean the differences between a minor injury and a life-altering one. Then we'll turn to the engineering perspective, how we can use our design tools from traffic calming to protective infrastructure to control energy in the real world. And finally, we'll look at a case study that brings these ideas together, showing how applying these principles can transform safety outcomes in our view. By the end of this session, we're hoping that you'll see kinetic energy not as an abstract physics concept, but as a practical lens for understanding and preventing serious and fatal traffic crashes. It's a way of thinking that helps us design systems where human mistakes don't have to lead to tragedy. So to guide us through this conversation today, we are joined by Dr. Les Comfort, a senior engineering research associate at the UNC Highway Safety Research Center. His work includes crash data analysis, the safe systems approach, and workforce development, and he has led a wide range of safety research projects for both FHWA and NHTSA. Dr. Comfort is also a key instructor for the Road Safety Academy and the Traffic Engineering Accident Analysis System. We're also very pleased to welcome Luana Brashears, a professional engineer with 15 years of experience across the public, private, and academic sectors. Luana currently serves as ITE's Planning and Safety Senior Director, where she leads research, technical initiatives, and project management in support of federal and internal transportation safety efforts. Her background includes extensive work in safety operations, multimodal planning, and development review. And then rounding out our panel today is Ryan McLean, a professional engineer who has worked in transportation planning and engineering since 2001. Ryan currently oversees the delivery of the Contra Costa County Transportation Authority's capital improvement, construction management, and innovative mobility programs. His work focuses on multimodal solutions, from single intersections to multi-jurisdictional corridors. And he partners closely with local agencies and communities to develop designs that work for all users. Ryan also teaches courses on complete streets and safety and lectures at UC Berkeley. Please join me in welcoming our incredible group of experts as we dive into today's discussion on kinetic energy and its implications for safety transportation systems. But before I turn things over to our first speaker, a quick reminder that you can use the Q&A button on your toolbar to ask questions throughout the program. We'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A session after our speakers are done with their presentations. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to.
Thank you so much. I'm very pleased to be here, and I am hoping to tee up Luana and Ryan through my discussion of some of the technical and scientific aspects of kinetic energy. So as was stated, I'm Dr. Wes Kumpfer, and I'm going to be talking to you about why kinetic energy really is the X factor in crash severity. And so what I'm going to be hoping to do in this presentation is to define kinetic energy in the context of transportation safety, to explain the role of kinetic energy in crash severity, to focus on speed as the primary cause of high kinetic energy, and to identify design and operational elements that affect kinetic energy. Now, I know that both Ryan and Luana are going to be diving into some of these later bullet points quite a bit more than I will. So my hope is really just to tee them up and to give you a taste of this concept so that we can have a robust discussion around what it is as practitioners that we can really do. I'm also going to give you a little bit of psychology and a better understanding, hopefully, of human behavior, and to really recognize why speed is such a central element of kinetic energy and why it can be difficult to address. So in that vein, I want to start out with a little thought experiment, and I would welcome you to put responses to this into the chat pod. I want you to think of a roadway near you, and I want you to answer these three questions in relation to that roadway. And you can pick any roadway near you, that's totally fine. Think about what is the speed limit on that roadway, and do you think that roadway intuitively leads drivers to that speed limit? And then maybe why or why not? And I'll give you a minute or two to think about this and see some answers pop up in the chat pod, and then I'll probably review some of those, and then I'll move on to an example that is very close to my house. All right, so while y'all are thinking about that, I am going to show an example of Weaver Dairy Extension. This is a road that is fairly close to where I live here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And this is a screenshot that I took from Google Maps. I can tell you this is a one lane in each direction road. There is a bike lane right there on either side of the roadway, and this particular stretch is approaching a rectangular rapid flashing beacon crossing where pedestrians are. And so, what I would like to ask in relation to this particular roadway, just looking at this and maybe thinking about the different roads that you were thinking is the roadway's purpose easily recognizable? Looking at this roadway, I might think, I don't know if that is super recognizable. I mean, it has bike lanes on it. It does have a pedestrian crossing there with an RRFB, but it looks kind of wide to me. And so this makes me think, is this road serving pedestrians or bicyclists or drivers? Is it maybe trying to jam all of the above into a space? Is the roadway easily distinguishable? Meaning, if we were to encounter this kind of roadway, uh, would we know what the speed limit should be? I don't know. That's a good question. How wide is it? How much traffic does it carry? It looks to me like it's pretty wide and probably designed to carry a lot of traffic, but we do have that bike lane there, which is a bit odd. And is it easily interpretable? Do I understand intuitively what speed I should go? So I see that there are some responses popping up to the questions I posed to you, with folks talking about 45 miles per hour, not self-explaining, how there may be wide lanes and multiple lanes, and when there isn't much traffic off peak. So would anyone like to take a guess as to, for this particular roadway, what the speed limit is on it? And again, you can go ahead and pop that in the chat pod. 40. 35. Very interesting responses, 35 and 30. Okay, so here is where I'm going to perhaps it'll indicate the problem with speed management and kinetic energy management. This roadway is actually signed at 25 miles per hour, but it is gigantic. It's designed really to carry emergency vehicles. There's actually a fire department at one end of the roadway, and it seems to have been designed to allow those large vehicles to use the roadway, but I can tell you from personal observation that when people are driving down this and there are no fire trucks around, people fly quite a bit higher than 25 miles per hour. And so, one of the central themes I'm hoping to draw out from this is that we really need to try to manage speed by designing intuitive roadways so that we can address kinetic energy. All these concepts are related. Our inability to prevent death and serious injuries on roadways is in many ways related to the way that we design roadways and expect drivers to interact with them. It really makes it important for us to consider how we are designing intuitive use of a roadway. It's important because speed kills. As was mentioned, that chance of death or serious injury increases quite a bit as your speed increases, and it really just comes down to physics. Kinetic energy is 1/2 times your mass times your velocity squared. So the most important factor there, as you could see from having that exponential on the velocity, is the velocity. It's your speed. This is the thing that drives that kinetic energy up, and it is what makes it so hard to prevent death and serious injury on our roadways. And oh yeah, I see one comment in there that my example assumes 25, no speed limits. Yeah. Yeah, definitely not very good signage either. There are some speed limit signs, but at least on that stretch I showed you, there weren't. So I'm going to present some statistics now to illustrate, the reality of why this is so important and what it is, or what I mean when I say that speed kills. So looking at the most recent NHTSA fatality statistics that were released, we can see that over time in the United States, vehicles have become safer for vehicle occupants. Those who are inside vehicles, their involvement in fatal crashes has been declining over time, and it has continued to go down. Even though we did see a slight bump around 2008, 2009 with the Great Recession, generally speaking, that trend has continued to go downward. However, we have seen an opposite trend where for people outside vehicles, so pedestrians, bicyclists, motorcyclists as well, we see that that fatality trend has been consistently going upward. There have been some slight changes here and there, especially with pedestrian safety, but generally speaking, our roadways are becoming less dangerous for people inside vehicles and more dangerous for people outside vehicles. And that matters when we think about who is protected and shielded from kinetic energy. Looking at these statistics in a slightly different way, we can see that pedestrian fatalities, that number has been relatively stable for a few years now. It did go down in 2023 from 2022, but it's still quite a bit up compared to some past years, compared to the substantial changes that we tend to see with vehicle occupants. And motorcycle safety and bicycle safety also remain a pretty consistent concern. They, in many ways, are difficult problems to tackle for many of the reasons that maybe pedestrian safety is not in quite the same way. But when we look at what affects kinetic energy and how it can impact different people involved in crashes, I mentioned earlier that the fatality trends for vehicle occupants has been going down over time, and part of that is the fact that we do have much safer vehicles, generally speaking. Uh, you know. You can now survive a collision within a vehicle that has better crumple zones, has better seat belts, has better airbags. And we do, I think, have a better sense of how kinetic energy is transferred between vehicles when a crash does occur. Some of the research that's done around the XCOMX model and some of the other impact angle models show that if you have, say, a rear end collision, so a crash that occurs at 0 degrees, then there's very little kinetic energy transfer compared to if it is occurring in that range of 210 degrees to 150 degrees. That's where things become much more severe. And you can think about this in terms of crash type. If we're talking about roundabouts, we know that roundabouts work not just because they slow people down, but because they change that angle of collision. You are now changing from, say, an angle or head-on type crash into maybe a 30-degree or a 60-degree crash. However, when we look at, or when we consider the differences between who is involved in those fatal crashes, if we're talking about people outside the vehicle or inside the vehicle, we see that even these safe spots where you can survive a crash at pretty much any angle, if you have a low enough speed, does not necessarily apply to people outside of vehicles. And there's been a fair bit of research showing that this follows something of a power curve. Um, Most of the statistics say, 18 miles per hour, that is where you get about a 10% chance of fatality or serious injury. Um, 20 miles per hour would be uh, how you would standardize that, I guess, with designs, but 18 miles per hour, it's about where that 10% fatality injury risk sits. And as you increase your speeds, you increase your chance of death or serious injury quite a bit. So while we can design for people inside vehicles and we can try to change the shape of how impact angle affects crash outcomes, it can be hard to do with pedestrians and bicyclists and remains something of a pernicious problem within traffic safety. Another thing that is worth considering when we are designing our roadways and thinking about who uses our roadways and if our roadways are intuitive for the different kinds of road users is to consider the fact that our motor vehicles have gotten quite a bit larger in the United States over time. So research done by IHS showed that our pedestrians are at greater risk because of vehicle design. So over the past 30 years, we know that our giant SUVs are now 4 inches wider, they are 10 inches longer, and they are 8 inches taller, and they're about 1,000 pounds heavier than they used to be. Uh, so while that V squared is the most important part of that kinetic energy equation, when your M value goes up, we do know that it can change those severity outcomes as well. And the reason why that bumper height is important is because it changes the way that injuries affect pedestrians and bicyclists. So in the past, if someone was struck by a car, maybe they would roll up onto the hood and there would be a greater chance of survival. However, if you have a large SUV that is striking someone square in the chest, there's more chance that they're going to be dragged underneath the vehicle and killed. And so we're looking at changes in the vehicle fleet and greater risk to pedestrians and bicyclists over time. And you can see this in the statistics, as I mentioned, with pedestrians, that there is just a disproportionate burden of injury. As I mentioned, that pedestrian fatality trend did change a little bit within the last couple of years. We have seen a little bit of improvement, but generally speaking, we have been on an upward trend for about 10 years now, and it is concerning for sure. We see that about an 80% increase in pedestrian fatalities from 2009 to 2023. It is who is being killed on our roadways is disproportionate. And it's also worth considering when we're talking about speed management, why it's so important, are some of the other human factors that are involved as well. We know that stopping sight distance increases the faster you're going, meaning it is much harder to react. But we also know that just from a human factors perspective, people's vision somewhat narrows and becomes tunneled as they go faster, making it much harder to react to, say, those pedestrians or those bicyclists who are crossing in front of you. And I do always like to add this caveat of should we be concerned about speed or speeding? And while most of the NHTSA related statistics that you're going to see are going to be related to speeding, because saying speed in a crash data form is much harder to measure, we do know that speeding involvement for crashes hovers at about 30% or so. You see this range here from 26% to 29%. Generally speaking, in the US, though, it has hovered at about 30% per year. And that has been consistent for a very long time. And speeding involvement tends to confound some of these other issues that we have to deal with when we're thinking about, say, lack of seatbelt involvement or alcohol use. Whatever we mix speeding as a risk factor in, it can become more dangerous. And so speeding is one of the things that we often focus on because it's what we have in our crash forms. It's what we know how to address. It's what our speed limits are designed for, helping us with enforcement. But my big point is that while we can tell you that, probably 30% or more of fatal crashes involve speeding, we also know that in many ways we design our roadways to convey unsafe speeds. We also know that demographics change, and as people are younger or older, they become more susceptible to kinetic energy as well. And all of this will lead me to just give you a brief taste of how we manage kinetic energy before I pass it off to Luana. So we need to consider how roads intuitively guide drivers to an appropriate speed. So I mentioned that at the very beginning when we were talking about that 25-mile-per-hour roadway near me. That was not an intuitively designed road. And it probably, because it was not designed to lead people to drive 25 miles per hour, when you have people of very different mass or different road users of very different mass, so SUVs, pedestrians, bicyclists, coming into conflict, then you're going to have unsafe outcomes. And so we need to make sure our speed limit and our context matches. And if that doesn't work, then we need to apply some countermeasures. And a lot of this ties into the fact that people do not generally make intuitive decisions when driving. They sort of just, or sorry, deliberative decisions. They tend to just follow their gut instincts. And we know that those gut instincts for how we drive are driven by basically our both the information we receive around us, they're driven by the environment. And so we can try to change people's behavior by providing information, or we can try to change that environment and just guide people without having to deliberately get them to make that decision. And that's again why things like roundabouts are so important. And so when we think about where kinetic energy management fits into the safe system approach, we could see that it affects, or sorry, speed affects both your crash likelihood and your crash severity. And so there's quite a bit that you need to take into account when designing our roadways within a safe system approach. That alignment and geometry, our impact angles, our traffic individual impact speeds, our vehicle design and mass, all of these things are worth considering from a safety perspective for the safe system approach. And there are a variety of different roadway design elements that could fit into these. I think in the interest of time, I'm not going to cover this too much. I'll let Luana share a bit more about her perspective. But we do know it is critically important to make sure when we are going to have a lot of different people coming into conflict with each other in a roadway to ensure that our speed limits are low, and we can often find great benefit from reducing those speed limits. And one way that we could also reduce those intuitive speeds is to reduce, or sorry, improve visual friction. Visual friction being just those roadway elements that sort of mentally restrict people as they're driving. So things like street trees, trash cans, flex posts, narrow lanes, these can all cause people to slow down. We could also rely on vertical and horizontal deflection, so speed bumps, curves, that kind of thing. But we can also think about where within our roadway system are we? And I apologize if this is just a little bit blurry, but if we're dealing with, say, rural or urban or suburban roads, there are a variety of different techniques that can be used to also slow people down. And I really like the way that the FDOT design manual addresses this by providing you a whole menu of things, saying if you're within, say, an urban area where you are in an urban center, you should really be targeting speeds as an engineer, as a planner from 25 to 35 miles per hour. And to get there, here are the things that you need to have on your roadways if you don't initially design for that target speed. Things like street trees, short blocks, speed feedback signs, so on and so forth. So, addressing all of this, making sure that we have our roadways that are intuitive, that guide people to appropriate speeds, helps us get to having the built environment component of the safe system pyramid where we are improving safety for all road users. And so, I guess in conclusion, I'll just say that kinetic energy does kill. Speed is our critical element of kinetic energy, and vehicle size does matter. But we want to make sure that we're keeping those speeds down, especially when different kinds of road users come into conflict. And we can design our roadways to be more intuitive, but we can also install speed countermeasures when they aren't. And this is all a critical element of the safe system approach. And with that, Luana, I think I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Wes. Really appreciate it. And this is a great um, follow up. Now, what I'm talking about is exactly what Wes just mentioned. How can we think about kinetic energy through the safe system lens? So what I'll do here today is give a framework. So really try to give you ideas and a higher level of how to implement those strategies to really try to manage kinetic energy in your systems. If you need links to resources or any of the things that I'm putting here on the slides today, please let me know, follow up, and I'll be glad to send you a lot of those resources following this presentation. So as Wes just mentioned, let's talk about the safe systems pyramid. So just to give you a quick overview of the safe system approach, when you look at this wheel from FHWA in 2022 at a national level, we adopted a national road safety strategy, which really told us and showed us that the safe system is the way to eliminate our fatalities and serious injuries in our roads. So when we think about the safe system wheel, we have all those principles and elements. So basically, when you think about the elements, safe road users, safe vehicles, safe speed, safe roads, post-crash care, and it's a cycle, right? Everything is working there together to make sure that collaboration exists. As we talk about here, responsibilities share, safety is proactive is one of the principles. Redundancy is crucial. And again, just talking about that Swiss cheese model that so many people talk about, right? Each of those safe road players has a role, and how can we make sure that if one of those layers fails, we are going to have somebody that's going to address the issue in the event of a crash and is not going to result in a injury or fatality. But what's really important here that I want us to think about is humans make mistakes and humans are vulnerable, and we'll talk about the vulnerability of the human body a little bit in the next slide. But what we thought was missing from the safe system wheel when we looked at this elements and principles was a connection with uh, how to prioritize strategies, right? So you know who is involved, you know principles to think about, but how can we prioritize your efforts? And if you work at a public agency, you know your resources are not unlimited. So you really have to make sure that you prioritize your efforts and attack what really matters and impacts the results of your safety, your road safety the most. So the safe systems pyramid is very interesting, is a concept that we adapted from our public health colleagues. And when you think about that is the how to start from the bottom with the strategies that really have the highest population health impact. So when you think about where to get started, and we've been hearing this discussion more and more about the connection between land use and transportation, and that's really where the bottom of the pyramid is. How can you work on policy? How you can work on your land use strategies? For example, how can you make sure that affordable housing near transit is going to be a safe strategy, or you reduce the distances from point A to point B to make sure that the exposure is reduced. So we talk a lot about the safe systems pyramid, and the important thing here too is to think about when you think from a public health perspective, you have a disease and you have an agent causing a disease. And that's exactly what the safe systems pyramid is based on. It considers the disease causing your fatalities and serious injuries in your roads as the kinetic energy. So kinetic energy really is the core of what we're going to talk about in this framework. So when you think about how to start your strategy, so from the socioeconomic factors, and then you engage the strategies in your built environment. So when you think about roundabouts, curb extensions, all the things that we usually do as planners and engineers. And then in order of priority, then you attack your latent safety measures. So signal timing, leading pedestrian intervals, automatic emergency braking. And then after you work on all those, what are some active measures that you can incorporate? So signals and signs, in-vehicle collision warning, seat belts. And then at the top of your pyramid is education. And we're not saying that the top is not important. What we're saying is if you really want to address the kinetic energy agent causing this disease, it's very important for you to start from the bottom, prioritize those efforts, and then just make sure that you complement all those with your education, your safety campaigns, and everything else. The reason I'm talking about this so much is because I feel like for several years, we have been focusing efforts on safety campaigns and education, driver education programs, which are very important. But what's really a safe system approach to road safety is to proactively design your communities, create transportation systems that really promote safety and reduce the reliance on individual behavior. One example that I really like to talk about when we talk about the safe systems pyramid is let's think about vertical risk. I feel like humans really understand vertical risk better than when we think about horizontal risk. So what does that mean? If you are building this 10-story building, for example, and each of the floors has a balcony, right? When you are about to approve the construction, the design of your building, each of the floors that has a balcony has railings in the balcony, right? You're not just going to put a balcony out there and put a sign and says, please do not trip, please do not fall. If you're on the 10th floor and you just have a sign, you know that people are going to make mistakes, and ultimately falling from a 10th floor without any protection is going to result in a fatality. So that's the same with our road systems, right? Why can we build road systems that in case of a crash is going to be the same as a balcony without a railing? So this is what the safe system is about, and this is what we'll talk a little bit more in that context. So Wes already mentioned a little bit about survivable impact speeds. And this is really where we make the connection between kinetic energy and what we can do as transportation professionals. The safe system principles, they really reframe speed management around human vulnerability and the physics of kinetic energy. So again, the equation of kinetic energy there. And we know that kinetic energy really increases with the square of speed. So even very small increases in speed produce very large increases in crash forces, which potentially can exceed the human body tolerance to impact. So that's why when we think about a safe system approach to managing kinetic energy, we start to think about safe system speeds. So safe system speeds, and Wes already mentioned several examples of that in research that show us what those speeds should be. How can we make sure that we're going to set those speed limits or target speeds that are based on survivable impact speeds? So that's where we start thinking about context appropriate design, context appropriate speed limits. How do we make sure that we design a road that in the case of a crash, no injury or fatality will happen? And we'll talk a little more about that in the next slides as well. But what's very important for us to focus here when you look at this table, for example, is if you have a transportation facility, right, you have to think about who are the road users that are present there. What are some potential conflicts that exist for all those road users that are present? And what level of protection that you have for those road users, similar to the railing on your balcony. And Wes talked a lot about that as well, how the vehicle technology has increased in protecting people inside the cars. But as transportation professionals, we have the the role to create seatbelts for people outside the cars. So the seatbelts and the airbags for people outside the cars are really how you design your system and protect people, especially vulnerable road user, pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcycles, as well as Wes mentioned in the statistics that we saw, who is overrepresented in road fatalities and serious injuries. So just to give you an idea, when we talk about people outside the car, this is a little graph that shows the survivable impact speed for a pedestrian. So as you can see, when you increase the speed for a vehicle, when a vehicle strikes a pedestrian, the chance of survivability is lower as you increase the speeds. So just a few things to keep in mind as we think about these things. So if we're thinking about kinetic energy, let's talk about the kinetic energy components in our transportation systems. And that's the exposure, severity, likelihood components that we always think about and how to address those. So again, this is just a high level framework of some ideas on how you can start to prioritize your strategies to really make a difference and really make sure that you have no fatalities and serious injuries in your system. So exposure, again, where and how far people are traveling, severity, speed, mass of the vehicle, and vulnerability in a conflict and likelihood where those conflicts occur. And then when you think about how to address those, the things that I really like to group under each of those components are demand management. So how can you decrease the reliance on vehicles through supportive land use, again, base of the pyramid? How can you increase the home employment, shopping proximity, reduce satellite development, shorten travel distances? How can you really reduce vehicle miles traveled, for example? So strategies like these really can help create shorter trips and shift the demand across several modes of transportation. And then for severity, really speed management, as Wes already mentioned before, how can we adjust speed for the context, the land use, self-enforcing roads? And then lastly, likelihood, right? So conflict management. And here are how we think about origins, destinations. So really a combination between planning and engineering working together. Access management, driveways, medians. How can you separate people in space? How can you separate people in time? And really improve the land use interaction with the roads to reduce the conflicts and improve predictability of crashes. So let's talk very quickly about each of those. So demand management, as I mentioned before, is one of the things that as planners and engineers, typically we just focus directly on those built environment strategies, right? So we go straight to, okay, these are how we're going to separate conflicts and how we're going to reduce speeds. But this really first step sometimes is missed when we're thinking about safety. But demand management really is the first step when we talk about safety strategies. So how can you reduce exposure? And we already talked about how shifting trips to other modes like transit when it's reliable, and comfortable experiences for the first and last mile accessibility are also strategies. Shortening trips. How can you have better job housing balance, affordable housing, close to transit stops, as we mentioned before? How can you eliminate trips by mixing land uses and really thinking again about the VMT mitigation and, of course, supporting needs of population facing persistent poverty? So mode shift really is a safety strategy. So that's one of the key things that I hope you keep in mind after this presentation when you think like in this photo, transit only lanes, transit priority operations, first last mile pedestrian bike connectivity to transit, mixed use compact grids, transit oriented development, all of those really are safety strategies. So this is just how to get started to think about all those things. And if we're talking about demand management, shortening trips, shifting modes, we start to think about how our roads function. And then that's the functional classification discussion that we've had for so long. And as I mentioned in the beginning, when you think about transportation systems, you think about who is using the road, who are the road users present, what are the potential conflicts, and what level of protection we have for road users. And that's when you start to think about, okay, people are using this road, they're using this space. And a really cool framework that we've been starting to try to implement from our colleagues from New Zealand, Australia, is the movement in place framework. So really try to balance the mobility with the livability of the spaces to guide the design, to guide the speed based on how people use the space. So not only vehicle volumes, but really aligning safety, comfort, and access. So the new way to think about functional classification, again, is also a safety strategy and a way to manage your kinetic energy in the system. So on the first graph there, you have movement and place. So movement in the vertical axis show how important a corridor is for moving people and goods. And then the horizontal axis shows place and how important it is as a destination where people live, shop, gather. So really creating that place and understanding how people are using that. So when both movement and place are high, that's when we get conflicts. And that's another conversation for another day, but that's an example of what happened in our stroads when things are not really defined, the function of the road and then also how people are using it. But again, the lesson learned from movement in place is we can design accordingly. We can use target speeds that match the place context. And that's just an example here. It's not necessarily for you to read. It's very small letters in there, but just for us to think about functional classification in a way that you have context appropriate solutions for all the modes that are using the road. So this is a NCHRP report 855 and just gives you an example of for vehicles, what should be the balance between speed, mobility, access for each of those contexts, and then really focused on target speeds. Then the green cells show the bike level of separation. So that's another thing, right? So think about context, how bikes are using, how many bikes are using this portion of your road, what should be the level of separation for them. And then the blue are the strategies for pedestrian facilities. So pedestrian traffic levels based on those, what should be the level of separation for each of those for each context. So now that we talked a little bit about demand management, we'll go right into the framework for a safe system for your speed management and your conflict management portions of it. So this is just the two things that, remember, I told you to really focus when we're talking about a safe system. We have to anticipate human error and accommodate human injury tolerances through the design of our systems. And these are the strategies that we can use. And again, here are just a few examples, but there are resources for each of these. If you want to learn more, please let me know. But to anticipate the human error and accommodate human injury tolerances, first you start with the speed management portion of it. So reducing speeds, reduce impact forces, and then in this order, separate users in space, time, and increase attentiveness and awareness. So just let me show you a few photos of these, what they look like. And these are things that probably you are already using as safety strategies. But just to make sure that this is a framework of how you organize your priorities and what comes after the other and the order of importance and how you have the highest population impact of your strategy. So speed management, we already talked about how this is a very important factor in kinetic energy. So some examples of speed management, we already talked about context appropriate speed limits, physical roadway designs, traffic calming, traffic signal timing that minimizes high speed flow. That's one of the things that there's so much new research on that, and it's fascinating how you can time your signals to make sure that that's also a speed management strategy. And then speed safety cameras, other example. And here is a resource that I really like. Okay, so let's talk about separating users in space first. So first you did the speed management part of it. Now you're gonna look at your conflict management portion of it. So separating users in space, very important. How to segregate the physical space to provide this dedicated part of the right of way for the different modes that are all in that same space. And this photo is from an urban environment, urban context. So how can you use sidewalks, bike lanes, protected intersections, or median refugees as the way to separate users in space? So it's either vehicles from vehicles, if you have the median separation as well, or vehicles from other modes. That some strategies that you can use for those. And this is an example from California of a degree of separation for bicycles. So how can you make sure that you have the appropriate level of physical separation? And here what they consider is context, volume, and speed of motor vehicles. So this entire Complete Streets Contextual Design Guidance is very interesting. If you have a chance to review that resource, they have also a list of safe system speeds based on context and road design. It's very interesting resource. And then lastly here, separating users in time. So strategies to separate users in time. Again, the separation space, very important. That's how you really make sure that the severe crashes are eliminated and fatalities are eliminated or reduced. But then if they have to occupy the same space, what are some strategies to separate them in time? And some of the things that you're already using as well, I'm sure split phasing, left turn phasing, bicycle signal phase, leading pedestrian bicycle interval, leading pedestrian interval, and exclusive pedestrian phasing. So all those are ways to, if users have to occupy that same portion of the road, how can you separate them in time? And then in the last order of priority, here are some examples for you to look. This is another resource that I really like from FHWA, and that's for mid-block crossing treatments for pedestrians. So that's based on speed limit, AADT. So there's some examples of what should be the appropriate pedestrian crossing treatment based on those factors. So again, separating your users in space. But then lastly, what I want to talk about are in the going up on the pyramid, right? So less population impact, but very important for reinforcing for the redundancy that we talked about. How can you increase attentiveness and awareness? And again, I mentioned to you, if you have the balcony, don't just put the sign in there. If you have anything on your road, really work on the design first, but use pavement marking signs to really reinforce the situation to improve safety in that stretch. So high visibility crosswalks, street lighting, enhanced signal and pavement markings, RFBs, pedestrian hybrid beacons, and the FHWA proven safety countermeasures really have awesome list of all these treatments as well. So, okay, this is just a very high level overview of the framework again. So a lot of those strategies you're already using. There's so many resources for you to learn more about each of those types of strategies. But when you think about prioritizing really from the kinetic energy risk and the components priority and really try to eliminate fatalities and serious injuries, which really is the goal here for our road safety. Try to start from the bottom of the pyramid and then go all the way up with all the strategies that can really provide redundancy and help reduce your fatality serious injuries. But this last slide, this is the QR code that takes you to IT technical councils and committees. They are all groups of volunteers that are working on awesome research. If you want to be part of any of that research or learn more about the work that they're doing, I highlighted here some examples of work that they're doing directly related to kinetic energy management. So we have a Transportation Planning Council that's working on rethinking functional classification, really diving into the movement in place framework. They are also working on the vehicle portion of it. So there is a technical brief that's coming up in the next month that is safer home vehicles as the overlooked variable in the safe system implementation, really connecting vehicle size to the kinetic energy portion of the safety equation. And then the Safety Council is also working on how to measure kinetic energy and evaluating those road safety risks. And again, making the connection with those kinetic energy aspects that we mentioned today. And we have a people-centered mobility great idea group that talks specifically about a lot of those topics. And one of them explores the movement in place as well, working together with the functional classification group. I know this is a lot. Thank you so much again for the opportunity to be here today. If you have any questions, please reach out to me and I'll hand it over to Ryan to give us a case study next. Thank you again.
Thanks, Luana. So I'm going to be talking about basically everything Luana just talked about and how we have applied that to our countywide transportation plan here in Contra Costa County. So, oops, a little bit too far. So a little bit of background about Contra Costa County. We're a very suburban county located northeast of Oakland in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. We've got a population of about 1.2 million. Our largest city is 125,000. So a very suburban environment, but fairly diverse demographically, economically, and geographically. So we've got several different regions, and each of those regions kind of has had different needs and desires over the years. So a lot of what has driven what the work that we do is just the tremendous growth that we've seen over the last 25 years or so. And that has been really, a lot of that has happened out in the East County area. So you can see that 684% growth in Brentwood between 1990 and 2023. So a lot of that growth out there has been suburban residential that then feeds into the other areas of the San Francisco Bay Area. So just a lot of transportation demand from that area over. And what that has led to is basically in 1988, we had a voter-approved half-cent sales tax that went to transportation to solve some of the issues that people were starting to see as we saw all that growth. And so CCTA, Contra Costa Transportation Authority, was formed to basically oversee those expenditures. So we build projects, we run programs, we pay for local streets and roads, we fund transit, but we do not own the roads, we do not directly set land use, and we do not operate the transit. So that has presented some challenges on what we can do, but we really wanted to see what we could do with what we can to start to influence kind of the safety outcomes that we're seeing. One of the other benefits that we see with our half-cent sales tax is that we actually can get a return on that investment. For about every dollar we collect in taxes, we get about $3 in grant funding from various sources at the regional and state and federal level. So it gives us a lot to work with from a financial standpoint. So over the last couple years, keep clicking too much, we have undertaken a new countywide transportation plan, and we do this every 5 or so years. And this really helps to set a vision for where we want to take transportation and where we want to spend that half-cent sales tax. So this new one that we have undertaken is really kind of a different way that we've gone in the past. We've funded a lot of freeway projects. We've funded a fair amount of transit projects. But most of the local streets and roads work we have done is giving that money over to those local governments and having them build the projects that they want. which often is repaving. So this one, we really see a need, and we're hearing this from the public to really start to see if we can do more local streets and roads projects that help benefit, achieve the outcomes we want from a safety standpoint. So we've done quite a bit of outreach around this and did a lot of looking at the needs in the area. And obviously, one of the key areas for us was safety. And so we saw a lot of unmet needs. We have a Vision Zero plan, we have a safety action plan, but we haven't really put those into practice as much as we need to actually start to move the needle on severe and fatal injuries. We see a lot of disproportionate burden, as Wes and Luana talked about, uh, with active transportation users, also in underserved communities that haven't had much transportation investment in the past. And while we've started to have plans in place to address these, we really need kind of to push out this toolbox of how to address that and think about how we can help guide our local agencies and us in implementing that. We did look at a lot of other needs as well, and these four kind of rose to the top. And I really like these four because they're all tied together. And especially when we start to think about the base of the pyramid and exposure rates, higher VMT is higher exposure. Higher VMT is also a sustainability issue and greenhouse gas issue. So you can tie those actually directly together, the same sustainability and safety piece. Same with connectivity. If we have better connections where people don't have to drive, then that reduces the exposure as well. And obviously, all of these things need to be addressed in an equitable way so that we can really see the progress being made across our entire county. So taking those needs, we came up with this 4 principles for our countywide transportation plan. And they're really directly related to those needs that we saw before. Safe travel, so traveling in my community is safe and comfortable no matter how I get around. Livable and connected neighborhoods, conveniently and comfortably get to places that are important to me without having to drive. Growing sustainably, confident that transportation investments in Contra Costa will help provide a sustainable future for my community, and access for all. I can shape and enjoy transportation projects that improve my community no matter where I live. So these were really our guiding principles for the development of the CTP. And again, the way these interact, they really can benefit. We can achieve all of these goals through similar measures. So this led to a movement in place framing, as Luana set up nicely for me to talk about, and really thinking about how people get around, but also these roads that we've built in a lot of places that were really kind of reactive to the land use and mostly the need of drivers to drive down these roads. How can we actually start to think more about how do we set these places up to have the safety outcomes that we're looking for? And again, it's just the network in the suburbs after World War II was really driven by thinking about the automobile and how do we maximize automobile throughput. And so this is a big shift, as I mentioned. CCTA would shift into more place-oriented streets instead of just reacting to land use decisions that are made at the city level or the county level, actually influencing those and making sure that the transportation system is coordinated with those. Looking at economic development, also giving people choice so they can choose to not drive. And then actually giving guidance out to the cities so that we can set these design expectations that we have for the roads based on the context. And this starts to, again, really look at classification and how we define these streets, thinking about that differently, and especially around the land use piece, thinking about how we move people as opposed to just cars, and really how that all ties to the quality of life that our residents are looking for. I really like this graphic that kind of helps to define that movement in place idea. And so again, when you have high movement and high place, we're kind of seeing that as the core streets. That's up in the upper right. And a lot of times those core streets were designed without people in mind. It was just how to get as many vehicles through as possible. And so this is really rethinking that. How do you get people through them while still reducing exposure, reducing speeds, reducing conflicts? So we've found that the core streets are really kind of the biggest need right now. Neighborhood streets are typically low volume areas. Place streets were already somewhat designed to help address the speed issue. And then we have some regional arterials that are really outside of the up place area. So core streets are what we see as a big need of focus. So we kind of then turned this into a decision-making tool for CCTA and how we think about the projects that we're going to put forward in the countywide transportation plan. So we really wanted to have an easy-to-use street typology. Again, we're not just doing our own projects, but we're trying to influence projects that our other jurisdictions are doing. Countywide maps that look at the safety needs. So this is high injury network or high risk network. This is showing gaps in infrastructure. It's also looking at target speeds, what we want speeds to actually be achieved, as opposed to just what speeds have been set by speed limits or what the actual operating speed is currently, but looking at target speeds and generating a map that shows where we need to get those speeds down. And then again, setting design expectations by street type. So how do we apply those design expectations? Again, a big focus has been on the core streets area, so I wanted to bring up one of those examples. One of the things that happened out in East County was as we were building a lot of the freeways, expanding the freeways, some of the highways that were left over remained these large roadways, but happened to go right through the middle of a core area. And were never really redesigned to be appropriate for that type of place. And so identifying that context and rethinking that context and not just accepting what's out there is a key first step. And then setting target speeds, like I said, looking at transit performance, looking at customer experience, and really getting towards the desired street use experience. Just, is this street doing what we want the street to do? And then applying the appropriate tools. A lot of those tools are what Luana just talked about. And this is really setting up this hierarchical approach, prioritizing demand management. If people don't have to drive, then that reduces the exposure. Speed management, again, getting the speed that we want to reduce the chance of an injury crash. And then looking at conflict management and how do we actually separate users in space and time. So this is the road in Antioch. That's you can see it's even wider than Wes's example, I think. So it's a huge road. Used to be the highway through here. There's actually a single-family residential, a lot of commercial, a church on one side, and then a lot of desire for people to be crossing the street with very limited opportunity to walk or bike across the streets. So this is an example of where we're never going to get to 25 miles per hour, people driving 25 miles per hour without some pretty substantial interventions. But 25 miles per hour, given the use context of this, is what we want the target speed to be. And this type of configuration probably looks pretty familiar. Again, how do we reuse that space to improve or to reach the outcomes that we want to? This is those vertical elements. This is narrowing those lanes. This is providing safe travel for other modes so people can make that choice. And goes beyond kind of just the typical road diet of restriping, but actually puts vertical elements and some other key features in there. And this outlines, I'm not going to go through all of this, but this just sort of outlines all the interventions, really thinking about to get people to be able to walk safely across the street, having frequent crossings, frequent and safe crossings, improving transit. We see transit as a key way to reduce exposure by, again, getting people out of vehicles. And so the way we can influence transit is by building transit islands, by encouraging our transit operators to operate higher frequency buses along here. And really, it's a comprehensive package on redefining the street to better match the actual place that it's in. So again, seeing this as a core street. And as I mentioned, we do not own right of way. We do not make land use decisions, but we do have a lot of funding. And so this is where we're really trying to come up with a toolbox and then help provide a carrot for that toolbox by tying funding to these types of improvements. And so that's the way that we're really trying to address this across the county, but thinking at the local level. And that is the end of my presentation. I think I will turn it back to Laura and we'll get into Q&A.
All right, that's correct. I got some notes after the first segment that I was getting some feedback, so I'm hoping you can all hear me a little bit better. If you can hear me, if I get a thumbs up from something, that would be really helpful. I do want to thank all of our presenters today. Fantastic presentations, excellent food for thought as we are pursuing our safety goals here in Central Florida and beyond. With the time that we have left, thank you, I'm seeing thumbs up, I appreciate it. With the time that we have left, we're going to be taking a few questions from our audience. So I see all of my panelists have their cameras back on. Thank you so much. If you would like to submit a question and haven't done so yet, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your toolbar. We'll get to as many as we can during our time together. And I'm going to go ahead and start with the questions that we've received so far. And while our speakers are answering those, feel free to add some more questions to that list. Okay, let me find a list of questions. So question number one. Wes, if you could start out with the answer for this one, and then if there is anything to add, please feel free. How is the research or academic community addressing the common pushback on major arterial roads where kinetic energy management strategies are largely removed from the toolbox? Is the focus limited to separating users in time, or are you promoting other tools as well?
That is a good question. And I would say one of the recent thrusts of research here in the United States ties into the movement in place framework that both Luana and Ryan shared. And that is perhaps we don't need to try to change the function of arterials. Perhaps we simply need to try to limit the access to them. So one success that a lot of other countries, especially the Netherlands, have had, and I know sometimes it's verboten to, cite the Netherlands because culturally they are very different than the United States, but one success that they've had has actually been a much more limited kind of functional classification where you have very high speed, low access roads, and you have only collectors that transmit from local roads. And so if you have very discrete road uses, then that would mitigate some of the problems that we have where you can't, say, put down some speed management techniques on a big arterial. In the United States, I do want to recognize the reality that that would take a whole lot of retrofitting across our entire network to get rid of these problematic arterials. But I do think it's worth it simply because we know that a lot of the places where pedestrians in this country are killed are on big arterials. So that would be one direction I would say is thinking about moving in place and thinking about self-explaining roads and the purpose for why we design arterials in the first place. And maybe I'll pass it to Ryan or Luana if one of them wants to chime in.
All right. Looks like maybe they were happy with it. So that's all right. So I'll go on and move to question number two then. I think maybe this one's for you, Luana, to start out with. The questioner is asking, as a founder of PeriZK, an active system using biomechanics to prevent kinetic energy from being projectile and street safety systems, how can a company like that work with the state to solve the kinetic energy problem?
That is a good question, and I was actually looking at the website of the company. So basically, it says that they're connecting scalable solutions for industrial, medical, and consumer sessions. And then one of the things that I thought was interesting is investing the core infrastructure of the next generation of human machine interaction. So I don't know that when I think about this in terms of transportation, the connection with technology is one of the things that we've seen on our V2V and V2X connection. So basically, how can we connect our mostly vehicles on the roads to the infrastructure. So that's the portion that I can think about our national initiatives. They're looking into connecting technology with what we're doing on the roads. But then on the other hand, when I think about technology, and not necessarily on the physical constraints of motion, but just because I see here that they're very high tech and thinking about how to use this is using connected vehicle data or GPS data, uh, all these sources of big data to try to be more proactive. So any solution that a company can bring that uses technology to be more proactive and identify those kinetic energy components, for example, risk factors such as conflicts. What we see now, it's a lot of use of big data to identify near misses rather than waiting for a crash to happen and then actually get to that point. So that's just some of the uses of technology that we see. Try to make the connection with the human body and the infrastructure, and also how can technology help us be more proactive and really eliminate all those risks before any crashes have to happen. But I'll hand it over to our researchers on that one, just because the vehicle side is not much of my expertise. So I don't know if Wes or Ryan have any thoughts on the actually biomechanical solutions for how that can happen us in our roads.
Not my area of expertise either, Luana.
Nor mine.
All right. Well, in that case, we will go ahead and move on. Thank you, Lana. All right. So the next question is for you, Ryan. The questioner would like to know, how did you develop the political support for this process, and what type of pushback did you experience?
This is actually, is that for me or for Ryan first?
It was for Ryan first, but we would
Okay,
love to hear
Ryan
from
first.
you
No,
after. Yes.
Ryan, go ahead. I thought you asked me, but you have Ryan go. I'll go after Ryan.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's sort of an ongoing process. I'll say we did do a lot of polling and questionnaires and outreach to the community, and this was what a lot of that community was asking for. It some of our electeds may have had some questions about it and been a little hesitant, especially on the how much we wanted to really require this of our local agencies versus just have this as recommendations. And that's still something we're trying to balance out. We're dropping things into categories of required or uh, basically influenced by funding that we'll give out to these agencies, and then just suggestions. So we are trying to categorize it that way. We don't want to put extra burdens onto our local agencies, but uh, we also have a lot of funding generated from this, so we're able to control that a fair amount. But I think we're just seeing a shift, and we're also looking for win-wins. So we also have a big countywide traffic signal project that's adding in the video analytics for near miss technology, while also helping platoon vehicles set green waves to get speeds at a certain level, and also improve transit signal priority and detection for bikes and peds. And so it's those types of projects too that we see as kind of win-wins, where we can sell it as, we are improving everybody's day to day, whether you travel by vehicle or by bike or walking or by transit. So that's another way that we're gaining political support.
Thank you. Or
I will. No, that's exactly it. I'll just add two links on the chat for two research projects that we worked with the AAA Foundation. Wes was part of one of the teams as well. UNC worked on that. So strategies for communicating with the community, and the other one is strategies for communicating with elected officials and other stakeholders. Let's say when you have safety, it's not just transportation planners and engineers, right? So you have to talk to your police department, enforcement, public health. So many people are involved. So just a few case studies to highlight a few strategies on how to communicate with the community and everybody that's involved on the political side as well when they're involved in safety decisions. So just two links on the chat. I think that worked, right? I sent to everyone. Okay.
Yeah, so that's like lovely. Thank you, Laura. And that was actually a great lead-in for our next question about sort of coordinating with other departments. This one's for you though, Ryan. The question is, how do you address the fire department requirements with context-appropriate solutions? Your 18th example meets the 20-foot minimum width if the fire can use the bike lane, buffer, and travel lane. But how does this address safety if the buffer is permeable for fire trucks?
This is a very good question. This is there's somewhat of a political challenge here, right? Fire departments have pushed back a lot on designs that are actually trying to make the road safer. And so how do you balance that with kind of ever increasing fire truck sizes? And so this has been some communication with them about if we can prevent the injuries in the first place, then maybe you don't need to respond to those. It kind of goes back to the smart signal discussion too. We're looking at cloud-based emergency vehicle preemption that will hopefully actually work better at uh, changing signals, clearing out roads so the emergency vehicles can get through, as opposed to just being a line of sight type device that you have to have the fire truck in line with the signal to have that happen. So it's trying to find those solutions that we can kind of work in a compromise with. We also have actually an SS4A grant right now that's looking at vehicle to everything V2X technology, where an emergency vehicle would actually broadcast out a message to help clear out the way of autonomous vehicles, but also any other vehicle that's connected. So it's really looking at how do we start to use technology to solve some of these issues that have gotten in the way of allowing us to build roads that are better for everybody.
Okay, great, thank you. Those are great options. The questions are rolling in really great now. I will say we are getting close to our time, so we'll maybe try and answer another couple. And then for any that we're not able to get to during the webinar, we'll try and get written responses that we can share when we send out the slide deck and the link to the recording. So for the next question that we're going to address here, this is for you, Luana, is how can we incorporate kinetic energy risk into our standard plans so the safer alternative is the one that is easiest to implement?
And I think that's one of the things that Ryan mentioned so well during his presentation. I feel like really trying to bring those high level concepts into how can you apply that to your specific conditions. So I really think that thinking about the safe systems pyramid and how that applies to your specific context, I think that's a good way to start thinking about strategies and putting together your Vision Zero plan or your safety plan based on those principles. So like I said before, it's not one size fits all for those solutions, but Ryan just showed a few examples of how they did at his agency, just really thinking about how can you incorporate this movement in place context or the exposure likelihood severity through the demand management strategies and then the speed management and then conflict management. So maybe trying to think about that from how does that really work for your specific conditions. So there are so many examples of countermeasures out there, but then the planning part really try to work with all the people that are involved and just not work in silos anymore. I think the most successful cases that we saw of people developing their action plans are people that really work together from the beginning. We see some cities, some counties have Vision Zero coalitions. So make sure that everybody has a voice, right? So get together with all the fire department, enforcement, planners, engineers with the community. The community really has an important voice. So every time you start developing your plan, just make sure that you listen from those people that may be seeing the day-to-day situations and safety concerns that you might not even be aware with. So I think it's really a combination. And again, the second resource that I posted on the chat really has examples of some agencies that were successfully developing their plans based on this framework and some key strategies on how to communicate and get all this together. So there are cities from all sizes in this case studies. You have smaller cities, medium, you have a state DOT. So there's really an example for each of those of who needs to be part of this. How do you get started? How do you build support? Institutionalizing your safe system in your agency is very important. So when you have your plan in place, make sure that you have those actionable items and how to institutionalize. So if you have your staff leaves, you have anything that for some reason all new people are starting to work on this plan, you have everything documented and ready to go, and then how to sustain it. Really try to identify funding sources and how to keep the safe system going. It's not just getting started, it's really having the strategies of how to sustain all that. So yeah, definitely look at some of those case studies, and they have great ideas from agencies there.
Great. Excellent. Thank you, Luana. This will be our last question during this live webinar. Leave it to whichever of you has thoughts. Technology is an interesting thread to pull at. Driver assist technology like autonomous braking might reduce collision potential, but early data seems to suggest that drivers are willing to place too much trust in unproven technology. Any thoughts from the panel?
I'll share that we have done some research that as long as the ADAS is being used, it can prevent a substantial number of fatalities. If you think about it as just an assistance system, that does fill in some of those gaps when our driver attention does lapse, that it is useful. I personally, this is me as a researcher, am a little bit skeptical of whether or not we'll ever reach full autonomous vehicles. I think getting past that human in the loop barrier is quite a challenge. So maybe I would redirect this question to say that one very useful form of technology that is actually gaining a lot of traction in the United States in a way that I didn't expect would be the ISA, the speed governors, effectively, right? So some states are now exploring these either through their vehicle fleets. So New York State is implementing them pretty widely in their vehicle fleet, or other states are exploring them as a punishment for super speeders who have been caught several times getting tickets. But I think actually, fixing the vehicle fleet so that people can't speed is one way that we could make pretty substantial safety gains. And it doesn't have to be a punishment. I think, we could move toward everyone just having ISA. I would willingly get it in my car if I could. But I think finding ways to implement it and spread it and normalize it can be something that will provide a lot of benefit.
Thank you. Ryan or Luana, anything to add?
I'm somewhat bullish on technology in terms of a safety solution. I think that there's been a lot of effort on in-vehicle technology and we've seen the improvements on driver and passenger outcomes from crashes. And, we did it with airbags, we did it with seatbelts. And so I do think that, to Wes's point, the automatic braking and that sort of technology, I think I think we need to move towards requiring some of those technologies that can actually prevent vulnerable user injuries and fatalities.
And again, it's not everything, right? So I think that's part of the question that says, well, but people trust too much, but that's a portion of your safe system. We have to continuing to work all together. Vehicles cannot just be 100% of it. So yes, there's definitely a portion of it.
It's going to be all the time that we have for Q&A today. Thank you all who submitted such great questions. I'm going to ask Rachel if you could share the slide that shows the credits. I do the final. So first, I want to say thanks to everyone that contributed to the webinar today and to all of you who are working to bring an end to traffic deaths and serious injuries. We truly appreciate your interest in making our roads safer, and it will take all of us working together to make that happen. Just a few housekeeping items to wrap us up. For those of you who are AICP certified planners, there is one CM credit available for this session. You can use the event number that's noted on the slide, also in the chat, to search for this webinar and add it to your CM log. And then a recording of this webinar will be available on MetroPlan Orlando's YouTube channel, and registrants will receive an email with the link. And on the next slide, we've included the contact information for our three fantastic panelists today, if you'd like to reach out with any additional questions to them or myself. And then looking forward, if you have any ideas for specific topics we can cover as part of our speaker series in the future, please do email your suggestions to visionzero@metroplanorlando.gov. We can have that email address in the chat as well. And if you would like to continue to follow the progress of Vision Zero Central Florida or get notifications about future speaker series events, please do sign up for our constant contact email list by navigating to visionzerocfl.gov. And then you can click on the Be a Part of the Solution button and scroll to the bottom to see the form so you can sign up for our list. In the meantime, we hope you'll join us on this quest to reach zero traffic deaths in Central Florida and beyond, and do your part to work for a safer transportation system. Thank you so much and have a great day.